Welcome to This Explainer. Okay, today we're going to challenge basically everything you thought you knew about those really loud modern debates surrounding religion and science. If you've ever felt completely exhausted by the endless arguments between staunch atheists and strict religious fundamentalists, believe me, you are not alone. But what if I told you that right beneath the surface of this culture war, there is a fascinating historical misunderstanding? Because think about it, what if modern atheists and religious fundamentalists are actually making the exact same mistake? I know, it sounds totally impossible, right? These two camps seem like complete opposites. Yet, according to some leading historical and theological research, both sides might actually be trapped in a uniquely modern mindset that completely misreads how humanity practiced religion for thousands of years. So here's our roadmap for this explainer. We're going to cover 1. Two sides, same coin. 2. Mythos and logos explained. 3. The changing meaning of belief. 4. The literalism trap. 5. Religion as a practice. And finally, 6. God beyond existence. All right, let's jump right in.
Part 1. Two sides, same coin. The paradigm shift.
To wrap our heads around this shared fallacy, we literally have to step completely outside our modern assumptions. We'll be anchoring our analysis today directly in Karen Armstrong's acclaimed book, The Case for God. Now, Armstrong doesn't take sides in today's culture wars. Instead, she actually takes us back in time to show us how our ancestors practically processed the world around them.
Which brings us to Part 2. Mythos and logos explained. The ancient balance.
To really build our foundation here, we have to understand how the pre-modern world acquired knowledge. You see, they used two distinct but equally important modes of thinking: logos and mythos. Logos, well, that was your pragmatic, scientific reason. It had to correspond exactly to external reality, to help you make a weapon or navigate a ship. But logos couldn't explain human grief. It couldn't give ultimate meaning to suffering. So for that, people turned to mythos. Mythos was a tool for emotional and spiritual meaning. Think of it like an ancient form of psychology designed to help people negotiate the really obscure, difficult regions of the human psyche. They were totally distinct, but completely complementary.
All right, Part 3. The changing meaning of belief. The turning point.
So what happened? Well, during the early modern period and the scientific revolution, our society's reliance on spectacular scientific logos basically caused us to lose that ancient balance. Because logos was achieving such incredible results, mythos just got discredited. And you can actually see this cultural earthquake right in our vocabulary. Look at the Middle English era. The word believe in meant to prize or to hold dear. Even up to the 1611 King James Bible, faith still meant loyalty and trust. But by the late 17th century, as scientific thinking really took over, the very definition of belief mutated. It morphed into merely giving intellectual assent to a scientific or theoretical hypothesis.
And that leads us to Part 4, the literalism trap, the shared fallacy. This linguistic shift is absolutely crucial because it forced ancient, highly symbolic religious myths into a style of scientific thinking that was completely alien to them. And that birthed two modern extremes. Today, both religious fundamentalists and new atheists fall into the exact same trap, this unprecedented, rigid literalism. Fundamentalists demand that ancient mythos be treated as scientifically accurate logos. And then on the flip side, new atheists treat God as a scientific hypothesis. They demand empirical proof and point out the lack of physical evidence. But here's the kicker. Both sides are completely ignoring centuries of mainstream symbolic theological traditions. As Armstrong points out, atheism is actually parasitically dependent on the form of theism it seeks to eliminate, because prominent new atheists focus exclusively on the scientifically inaccurate, literal God touted by modern fundamentalists. They unknowingly become a reverse mirror image of the exact ideology they despise. They're literally fighting over a modern, rationalized distortion of religion, not the historical practice itself.
Part 5. Religion as a practice. The lost art.
So, this raises a pretty massive question. If ancient religion wasn't about intellectually agreeing with a literal scientific hypothesis, well, what exactly was it? To grasp this, we really have to stop thinking of religion as something you think, and instead look at a universally understood human experience. So, how is religion like learning a musical instrument?
Think about it.
Just like you can't learn to swim, dance, or play the violin by simply reading the instruction manual, ancient religion was a practical discipline. You can't just study the rules, you actually have to practice the discipline. The early Taoists called it a knack that you acquire through dedicated action. When a musician practices relentlessly, they eventually bypass conscious logical deliberation and just lose themselves in the music, right? The Greeks called this ekstasis, a stepping outside the norm. Ancient religion was entirely designed around this dedicated practice to help humans transcend their original capabilities and essentially step outside their ego.
Armstrong has this great quote. She notes that judging religious texts without actually participating in the transformative rituals is exactly like judging a complex Beethoven symphony solely by staring at the sheet music. I mean, if you just read the notes without actually playing the instrument, it's going to look obscure, complicated, and entirely pointless. You have to translate the myth into ethical action to actually discover its truth.
Finally, Part 6. God Beyond Existence, the Climax.
This fundamental misunderstanding of religion as just a list of facts really culminates in how modern society defines the concept of God itself. And honestly, this is where the history gets truly mind-bending. Let's look at apophatic theology. For centuries, mainstream theologians insisted that God is not a supreme being that exists in the way a chair or a star or a human exists. In fact, if you asked an ancient theologian if God exists, they would probably say no, because our human concept of existence is just way too limited to apply to the divine.
It is absolutely astonishing to realize that ancient thinkers deliberately subverted normal speech. Some even preferred calling God nothing, because God was not another being. And they did this intentionally. They wanted to protect the divine's absolute transcendence from being domesticated or boxed in by human limitations. They knew for a fact that the moment you try to clearly define God with human words, you're shrinking the concept into an idol. They actually devised spiritual exercises just to constantly remind the faithful that their words were inadequate.
Therefore, treating God as a scientifically verifiable fact, something that can be empirically proven or disproven, is an entirely modern idolatrous trap. It completely ignores centuries of deep theological thought. See, when modern society reduced God to just another being inside the cosmos who designed it, basically a scientific hypothesis, it became incredibly easy for scientists to find alternative hypotheses and render that version of God redundant. But that version of God was a modern invention anyway. As the theologian John Caputo brilliantly notes, whatever it is you say God is more.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this final thought. If we're stuck in a culture war, arguing endlessly over a modern, literalist concept of God that ancient sages would have outright rejected, what are we losing? If we finally abandon the literalist trap and truly recognize the distinct value of both science and myth, what incredible transcending capacities of the human mind might we rediscover? It really makes you think. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.